My cousin schemed to steal my bank card and take out loans under my name. My name is Alex Ward, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that the most dangerous thieves aren't the ones lurking in dark alleys. They're the ones sitting across from you at family dinners, laughing at the same jokes, calling you brother. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with something small, a misplaced bank card. I'd been at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, one of those slightly chaotic gatherings, where my mom tried to feed everyone like we were still kids and my dad nodded off in his recliner after dessert. My cousin Ryan was there too, late 20s like me, taller, louder, always the type to fill a room whether you wanted him to or not. We weren't close the way we'd been as kids, but there was still that family thread between us. I'd helped him with computer issues more times than I could count, and he'd crash on my couch if he was in town for a late night party. That night, after I got home, I noticed my wallet felt too light. My card slot was empty. I figured I'd left the card at the cafe I'd stopped at earlier, or maybe it slipped out at my parents' place. I texted Ryan and a couple of other relatives who were still there. Ryan replied almost instantly, "Haven't seen it, man. Check your car. Maybe I did. Nothing." Eventually, I called the bank to freeze the card just to be safe. The rep told me there were no unusual charges yet, so I chalked it up to bad luck and ordered a replacement. I didn't think about it again, not for a while. 3 weeks later, I got the first letter. It was from a credit company I'd never used before, congratulating me on being approved for a personal loan. At first, I assumed it was one of those junk mail scams, but when I looked closer, the letter had my real address and my real social security number in the for your records section. My stomach sank. I called the lender immediately, and after an agonizing series of hold music loops, I got through to a representative. She confirmed in a tone that was trying too hard to be neutral that the loan was in my name approved online and that the funds had already been dispersed to a checking account that wasn't mine. I told her it was identity theft. She said I'd need to file a police report before they could investigate further. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept spinning through all the possibilities. Had my data been stolen in some breach? Was someone selling my information online? The next day, I checked my credit report. That's when the bottom dropped out. Not one, but 4 new accounts had been opened in my name in the past month. 2 loans, 1 credit card, and a store financing account for a high-end electronics purchase. Someone had gone on a spree. The police station smelled faintly of burnt coffee and paper. I sat across from Officer Mitchell, who typed my statement into a worn desktop computer. "Any idea who might have access to your personal information?" he asked without looking up. I hesitated. I thought about Ryan, about how, when we were younger, we used to share logins and passwords for games, about how he'd stayed at my place last summer and borrowed my laptop when his phone died. "I'm not sure," I said carefully. "It could have been from old files, maybe something online." Mitchell nodded clearly, filing my case under one of dozens. He gave me a report number and told me to contact the FTC and all 3 credit bureaus. When I left, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Hey man, random question, you still with the same bank?" A normal person might not think twice, but my gut twisted. I typed back, "Yeah, why, just wondering, thinking of switching, no follow-up." Over the next week, I started piecing things together. I called each lender, confirmed the fraudulent accounts, and asked for the IP addresses used to apply. 2 of them actually provided them. I cross-referenced them against my own internet history using a tool a friend in cybersecurity had told me about. 1 IP address matched my parents' home network. That was the first real crack in the wall. I didn't confront Ryan right away. Part of me didn't want to believe it. I mean, sure, he'd always been the reckless one, the guy who borrowed money and forgot to pay it back, who jumped from job to job like stepping stones. But this was different. This wasn't just borrowing $20 for gas. This was a felony. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more the pieces fell into place. Ryan had been unusually attentive lately, checking in with me more than he ever did before. He'd also been at my parents' place on multiple random weekdays, something I'd learned from my mom in casual conversation. It wouldn't have been hard for him to find an old piece of mail with my information, and if he'd taken my card that night at dinner even briefly, he could have copied the numbers before I canceled it. The breaking point came when I got a fraud alert for a 5th account, a payday loan in a city 2 hours away. I called the lender and asked for the pickup location. The clerk hesitated, but when I pressed, she confirmed the name of the person who'd collected the cash. It wasn't my name, but it was my last name, and the first name, Ryan. I remember sitting in my apartment after that call, the rain tapping against the windows, my coffee going cold on the table. There's a moment in betrayal when the shock burns off and you're left with something heavier. Not anger, not even sadness, just a sharp, hollow awareness that someone you trusted has been moving against you for longer than you realized. That's where I was. I could have called him right then and blown up over the phone, but that would have given him a chance to spin it to play the "we're family" card to make me doubt my own judgment. No, if Ryan wanted to play this game, I'd have to play smarter. I dug in. I printed every fraudulent account statement, every lender letter, every screenshot from my credit report. I called Officer Mitchell and added the payday loan detail to my file. Then I reached out to someone I hadn't thought about since college, an old roommate named Alvarez, now working as a private investigator. When I explained the situation, Alvarez didn't even sound surprised. "Family's the worst when it comes to this stuff," he said. "They know the doors that are already unlocked." He agreed to help me track down hard proof that Ryan was behind the whole scheme. And as I hung up, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I wasn't just going to stop Ryan. I was going to make sure he couldn't do this to anyone else ever again. Alvarez worked fast. 2 days after our call, he texted me, "Meet me at 6. Usual Diner." The Usual Diner was a hole-in-the-wall place we used to hit during finals in college. Cracked vinyl booths, coffee that could strip paint, and a waitress who'd been working there since the Carter administration. When I slid into the booth, Alvarez was already there, a black folder in front of him. He didn't waste time with small talk. "I've been pulling some strings," he said, flipping the folder open. "Remember that payday loan you mentioned security footage from the pickup location?" He turned the folder so I could see. It was grainy, but the man in the frame was unmistakable. Tall, hoodie pulled halfway up, and when he looked up toward the counter, the camera caught him full face. Ryan, holding my ID. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. "They'll claim it's bad footage," Alvarez said, "but I also got stills from a gas station across the street. Same guy, same hoodie, same timestamp." He slid another sheet over clearer, this time the fluorescent lights catching the side of Ryan's face. "And here's the kicker," Alvarez added, pulling out one last sheet. "Bank statement from the account where the loan was deposited. Guess whose name it's under?" My stomach tightened. "Ryan's. Bingo. And he's been using that account for other deposits too, including one from a store credit line you said was fraudulent." We sat there for another half hour, going over the paper trail. Alvarez had managed to pull transaction logs that tied Ryan's account to multiple purchases made with the fraudulent cards, electronics, designer clothes, even a hotel stay. He wasn't just paying bills, Alvarez said. He was living large and sloppy. It was enough to take to the police, maybe even the DA. But as I left the diner that night, I kept thinking about the conversations I'd had with Ryan over the past few months, how he'd laughed when I mentioned my rent going up, how he'd made offhand jokes about easy money and knowing the right people. I realized those weren't just throwaway lines. They'd been little victories for him, knowing what he was getting away with right under my nose. The next morning, I took everything: my original documentation, Alvarez's findings, the security stills, to Officer Mitchell. When I laid the evidence on his desk, he raised his eyebrows. "You weren't kidding about having a suspect. Do I need to spell it out?" I asked. "Nope," he said, already picking up the phone. "We can bring him in for questioning." But bringing him in didn't mean I'd get the satisfaction of a confession. Ryan denied everything at first, claiming the footage wasn't him, that someone must have stolen his identity too. It wasn't until Mitchell mentioned the bank account in Ryan's name, the one the payday loan funds had gone into, that the cracks started to show. "Maybe I let a friend use my account," Ryan muttered. "What friend?" Mitchell asked. Ryan didn't have an answer. Over the next week, the investigation moved faster. Subpoenas went out for Ryan's financial records. Search warrants were prepared for his apartment. And me, I was caught between two worlds, the professional part of me gathering evidence like it was a work project, and the personal part of me that was grieving the loss of trust in someone I'd grown up with. Because even with the proof piling up, a small part of me still remembered the kid I used to build tree forts with in my grandparents' backyard, the cousin who'd been my partner in schoolyard dares. But that kid was long gone. The man sitting in an interrogation room downtown was a stranger wearing his face. It was Alvarez who kept me focused. "You're not just doing this for yourself," he reminded me over the phone. "You're doing it so he doesn't wreck someone else's life." And he was right. because if Ryan was willing to do this to family, he'd have no problem doing it to anyone. When the DA's office finally called to say they were pressing charges, identity theft, fraud, and multiple counts of grand larceny, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because the system was taking it seriously. Dread because this was going to blow up the family in ways I couldn't predict. That prediction came true the night before Ryan's arraignment. My phone lit up with my aunt's number, Ryan's mom. "Alex," she said without preamble. "What are you doing? Ryan told me you're trying to ruin his life." I closed my eyes. "Aunt Lisa, he stole from me. He opened accounts in my name. I have proof. He said it was a misunderstanding. And even if it wasn't, your family. You don't drag family into court." I almost laughed. "He dragged me into debt collectors and police reports. Court is where this belongs." She hung up without saying goodbye. That was when it hit me in their eyes. I wasn't just the victim anymore. I was the one breaking the unspoken rule, keep it in the family. But I'd made my choice. I wasn't going to protect someone who tried to destroy me. The next morning, I sat in the back of the courtroom watching as Ryan was led in wearing a rumpled shirt and an expression that was half boredom, half defiance. When his eyes met mine, he smirked as if to say, "You think you've won," but that smirk only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. This was about control. And I was done letting him have it. I sat at my kitchen table for what felt like hours that night, the missing debit card lying in the center like a piece of damning evidence. I kept picking it up and setting it down as if the act might somehow explain how it had vanished. The more I thought about it, the more the timeline made sense, or rather, the more it made it a kind of sickening sense. Ryan had been over less than a week ago. That was the only time recently I'd left my wallet unattended. That was the only time anyone besides me had been here. But it was Ryan, my cousin, the guy I'd grown up with, the guy I'd once sworn I'd have in my wedding party someday. And yet, here I was wondering if he'd stolen from me. I didn't want to believe it, so I did what I always do. When I need clarity, I started making a list. Who had been in my apartment the last month Ryan for the game night? My friend Marcus, but we'd been out most of the time, and Marcus wasn't exactly hurting for money. The building maintenance guy fixed my leaky sink, but was never near my wallet. The list was short, and Ryan's name sat at the top, like it was daring me to ignore it. I told myself I needed proof, real proof, because if I confronted him now, he'd deny it, and I'd just be the paranoid cousin accusing him without evidence, and that would give him time to cover his tracks. The next morning, I went to the bank in person. I sat across from a middle-aged woman named Teresa, who listened carefully as I explained the loan alerts and the missing card. She tapped away at her keyboard for a while before sliding a printout across the desk to me. It was a list of transactions from the missing card. Most of them were standard: a gas station near my apartment, a grocery store I sometimes used. But then 3 days ago, a series of charges appeared that I didn't recognize: $1 $200 transfer to an online payment processor, $500 withdrawal from an ATM in a different part of town, $3,000 payment to a loan service fee. I pointed to that last one. "What is that?" Teresa leaned in. "That's usually part of setting up a high-value personal loan. It's the initial fee before funds are disbursed." I felt my stomach tighten. "Can you see where the loan was going to be deposited?" She scrolled through her screen. "Yes, it's a checking account at another bank. The name on the account is Ryan Miller." I just sat there staring at the paper. My cousin's name right there in black and white tied directly to my stolen card. Teresa looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Ward, this is serious. You should report this to the police before any more damage is done." I nodded slowly. "Not yet. I want to make sure the person responsible can't talk their way out of it." She gave me a look like she wasn't sure if that was wise, but I didn't care. If I went to the police now, Ryan could claim it was all a misunderstanding. He could return the card and say he just borrowed it without asking. No, I needed something undeniable. That night, I started keeping a folder on my laptop labeled "For Evidence." Screenshots of every bank alert, photos of the missing card slot in my wallet, even a picture of Ryan's text messages from the last month just in case. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't let on that I knew, but in my head, I was already building the trap. The hardest part was pretending nothing was wrong when my mom called me 2 days later. She mentioned that Ryan had been doing better lately and that he'd even been talking about getting a new car. I had to bite my tongue to keep from blurting out that he was doing better on my dime. I didn't tell her. Not yet. because I knew the moment this became a family issue, everyone would have an opinion. Some would side with me, others would defend Ryan, and the truth would get lost in the noise. This wasn't about family politics. This was about stopping someone who thought they could rob me blind just because we shared some DNA. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed except the moment to spring it. That I decided would come when Ryan tried to make his next move, and something in my gut told me that wouldn't take long. My gut was right. 2 days later, on a quiet Sunday morning, I woke up to 3 new email notifications from my bank. The first was the familiar loan application received message. The second was a request for additional documents to verify my identity. The third, the one that made my chest tighten, was a congratulations, your loan has been approved email. The loan amount $25,000. The deposit date tomorrow morning. I rubbed my face, forcing myself to stay calm. If the funds landed, Ryan would have what he wanted, and I'd be the one left holding the debt. But if I stopped it too early, I'd lose my chance to catch him red-handed. I logged in and checked the details. The receiving account number matched the one Teresa had shown me earlier, Ryan's account. That meant there was still a small window to intercept him. Instead of calling the police right away, I called the bank's fraud department. I explained that I was aware of the fraudulent application and that I wanted to arrange an in-person identity verification before the loan could be processed. I made it sound like I was cooperating fully, even offering to meet at the branch to sign the final paperwork. The rep hesitated. This wasn't standard procedure, but I dropped a few hints about keeping my lawyer happy and avoiding misunderstandings, and eventually got them to agree. The meeting was set for Tuesday afternoon. Now all I had to do was make sure Ryan showed up. I sent him a short, casual text. Hey, weird question. Did you put in a loan app under my name for that thing we talked about? Bank wants me there to sign. If you did, just meet me Tuesday at the branch 3 p.m. No accusation, no drama, just bait. 10 minutes later, he replied, Ryan, yeah, bro, that's what I was saying the other day. I'll come with you. Don't worry, I'll handle everything. Reading that text made my skin crawl. Don't worry. He was telling me not to worry about the fact that he'd stolen my card, my information, and tried to stick me with tens of thousands in debt. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Detective Alvarez, a contact from a neighborhood watch meeting I'd attended years ago. I told him the whole story, from the missing card to the forged applications. He didn't sound surprised. Sounds like he's getting bold. Alvarez said, Good. Bold means sloppy. We'll be there Tuesday. Tuesday came faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before, running through scenarios in my head. What if Ryan didn't show? What if he got suspicious? What if the bank backed out of letting the cops be involved? By 2:45 p.m., I was sitting in the bank lobby pretending to scroll on my phone while 2 plainclothes officers waited outside in an unmarked car. Teresa was at her desk, already in on the plan. At 3:01, the door swung open and Ryan walked in wearing his nicest shirt and an easy grin. He spotted me and waved like nothing was wrong. Hey man, he said, sliding into the chair next to me. Ready to get this sorted so we can both move on. That was the moment I knew I wasn't imagining it. He genuinely thought he'd get away with this. Teresa called us over to her desk. Ryan leaned forward, all charm, as she began pulling up the loan file. Mr. Ward, she said, looking at me, before we release the funds, we just need to confirm a few details with the account holder on the receiving end. That would be Mr. Ryan Miller. Ryan nodded confidently. That's me. That was the cue. Teresa pressed a button under her desk. Less than 10 seconds later, the bank doors opened and Detective Alvarez walked in with another officer. Ryan Miller, Alvarez said, You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and attempted grand larceny. The look on Ryan's face, the shift from smug confidence to raw panic, was something I'll never forget. His mouth opened, but no words came out. As they cuffed him, he finally managed Alex tell them it was just a mix-up, but I didn't say a word. I just stood there watching as my cousin, the one I trusted like a brother, was led out of the bank and into the back of a police car. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. The drive home from the bank felt surreal. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was spinning. The image of Ryan being led out in handcuffs replayed over and over, not because I enjoyed it, although I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that felt some grim satisfaction, but because it marked the moment everything changed between us. There was no going back now. By the time I got home, my phone was already lighting up with missed calls and texts from family. Word had traveled fast, probably thanks to Ryan himself, who, knowing him, was already working on his poor, misunderstood cousin narrative. I ignored them all for the moment and called Detective Alvarez instead. What happens now? I asked. He explained that Ryan had been booked and charged, and that since the amount exceeded a certain threshold, this was considered a felony. The bank had already provided documentation linking his account to the stolen funds and applications, and the stolen debit card was found in his backpack when he was arrested. That detail hit me hard. It wasn't just that he'd taken the card, he'd been carrying it around like it was his property. "Will I have to testify?" I asked. "Most likely," Alvarez said. "But with the evidence we have, this should be a straightforward case. Just be prepared for the personal fallout." The personal fallout started that same evening. At 7 p.m., my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She didn't even sit down before she started in. "Alex, what were you thinking? He's your cousin. You had him arrested." I took a deep breath. "Mom, he stole from me. He tried to put me in debt for over $40,000. What was I supposed to do?" "Pretend it didn't happen." She crossed her arms. "He's family. You work in IT. You make good money. You could have helped him instead of ruining his life." That stung. "Help him by letting him commit fraud in my name." Her expression softened just a fraction, but she didn't back down. "I'm just saying, maybe you could have handled it differently. Now, the whole family is going to be talking about this for years." I realized then that to her the family's image was more important than what had actually been done to me, and I knew this conversation was going nowhere. "Mom, I need you to leave," I said, quietly. "And I need you to understand something. I didn't ruin Ryan's life. He did." After she left, I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time. The reality was sinking in. I had exposed Ryan, but that didn't mean the emotional cost wasn't high. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Some family members sent me cautious, supportive notes. "I'm sorry you had to deal with this." Others sent outright accusations. "Can't believe you do this to your own blood." And then late one night, I got a message from an unknown number. "Ryan, you think you've won. You have no idea what's coming." I stared at it for a long time before forwarding it to Alvarez. He told me not to respond, just to keep a record. I didn't know if Ryan was bluffing or if he still had tricks up his sleeve, but one thing was certain: this wasn't over, and the thought of what he might try next kept me sleeping with my phone within arm's reach and the front door double locked. The next morning, I woke up to a gray, heavy sky, the kind that made the city feel muted and tense. It matched my mood perfectly. I knew that Ryan's arrest had only been the first battle. If his text was any indication, he was going to make this ugly. The first sign came at 10:15 a.m. My work phone rang and it was HR. "Alex, can you step into my office?" My HR manager, Helen, had a tone that was polite but tight, like she was already bracing herself for something unpleasant. When I got there, she closed the door and slid a folder across the table. "We received an anonymous tip through our ethics hotline," she said. "It claims you've been using company resources to run a side business, possibly something involving stolen identities." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so obvious who had made the call. "Helen, this is ridiculous." She didn't smile. "I'm not saying I believe it, but we have to look into it." The complaint was detailed: dates, supposed client names, even screenshots. That made my stomach drop. Screenshots. She turned the folder toward me. The images inside were laughable, clumsy Photoshop jobs using old photos of me from social media pasted onto fake emails and financial documents, but to someone who didn't know me, it might look bad at first glance. "I'll cooperate fully," I said, my voice steady, "but I know who's behind this. My cousin, the one arrested for trying to steal from me, is trying to retaliate." Helen frowned. "If that's true, it's serious. But for now, we just need your written statement and access to your company laptop for review." I handed it over without hesitation. If Ryan thought this stunt would make me crack, he didn't know me as well as he thought. Still, the incident rattled me. He'd moved fast, and he was willing to cross lines I hadn't even considered. That night, I called Alvarez. "He's trying to frame me at work now," I said, explaining what had happened. "Classic intimidation," Alvarez replied. "Document everything. And Alex, don't engage with him directly. That's what he wants. He wants you to slip up so he can twist it against you." I followed his advice. Every new text call or rumor got dropped into my evidence folder. But Ryan wasn't slowing down. 2 days later, I got a call from my landlord. "Alex, someone's been asking about your lease." Said they were a friend of yours and needed to get into your apartment to pick up some things. I felt my pulse spike. You didn't let them in, did you? Of course not, my landlord said. But they were persistent, said you'd lost your keys. I knew it was Ryan. And if he was desperate enough to get inside my place, it meant he either wanted to take something or plant something. That night, I installed a small camera above my front door. I also changed my locks. It felt paranoid, but I reminded myself that this was the same person who had already stolen my bank card and forged my identity. The real punch to the gut came the next weekend. I was out grabbing groceries when my mom called. Her voice was cold. Ryan told me you're trying to ruin him because you're jealous, she said. He says you've been holding some grudge since you were kids and now you're making up lies to get him arrested. I stopped, in the middle of the sidewalk. Mom, do you hear yourself? He stole my card. The bank found his name on the receiving account. The police caught him with my card in his bag. There was a pause. Then I can't believe he'd do that to you. Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I could hear that she did believe it deep down. But belief and acceptance aren't the same thing. Mom, I said, gently, I need you to understand something. Ryan is dangerous right now. He's not just trying to get back at me. He's trying to erase what he did. If you keep giving him the benefit of the doubt, he'll use you to do it. She didn't answer, and I knew the conversation was over for now. When I hung up, I leaned against a brick wall and let the weight of it all sink in. This wasn't just about catching Ryan anymore. This was about surviving the smear campaign he was building around me. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to go on offense. I called Alvarez. Detective, if I can get you more proof of him trying to sabotage me, can we add that to the charges? Yes, he said, but it has to be solid, no speculation, no setups that could be seen as entrapment. That was fine with me. I didn't need to make Ryan do anything. He was already on a self-destructive path. All I had to do was let him keep digging. The next day, I bought a second camera, this one hidden inside a fake plant in my living room. If Ryan somehow got inside, I'd have him on tape. It wasn't a comfortable way to live. Every creak in the hallway made me tense up. Every unknown number on my phone felt like another trap. But I reminded myself of the truth. The only way to end this was to see it through to the end, and make sure that when the hammer came down, there'd be no escape for him this time. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I started to picture the moment I'd finally get to show everyone, my family, my coworkers, the doubters, exactly who Ryan really was. Because when that day came, it wouldn't just be justice. It would be the point of no return. The point of no return came sooner than I expected. It was a rainy Tuesday when my front door camera caught something, not Ryan himself, but a figure in a hooded sweatshirt, lingering outside my apartment for nearly 15 minutes. They didn't knock. They didn't try the handle. They just stood there, shifting their weight, glancing toward the street every few seconds. When I zoomed in on the footage, the posture was unmistakable. It was Ryan. I sent the clip to Detective Alvarez immediately. His reply came within an hour. Not enough for trespassing charges, but it confirms he's watching you. Be careful. Careful wasn't going to cut it anymore. That Friday, I came home from work to find a plain white envelope slid under my door. Inside were 3 printed screenshots, the same fake ones HR had shown me, and a handwritten note in jagged, aggressive pen strokes. You think the cops will save you? I'm not done. I stared at the paper, my pulse steady but heavy, like my body already knew this was a turning point. Instead of ripping it up, I carefully placed it into a plastic folder for evidence. If Ryan wanted to intimidate me, I'd make sure every single attempt went into a file that could bury him. The following week, Alvarez called with an update. We're moving forward with additional charges for attempted fraud and harassment. But Alex, this is where things can get messy. His attorney might push for a plea deal, and that could mean less jail time. The idea of Ryan getting a slap on the wrist didn't sit right with me. Messy I can handle. Just tell me what you need. What he needed, it turned out, was corroboration proof that Ryan's actions weren't just isolated stunts, but part of an ongoing campaign. That meant my job was to keep living my life while quietly documenting every move he made. Easier said than done. The family drama escalated in parallel. My Aunt Ryan's mother called me one night, voice dripping with venom. How dare you drag this family through the mud? Do you think we can show our faces anywhere? Now? I kept my tone flat. Maybe ask your son why he put us here. She hung up on me. But then something shifted. My younger cousin, Emily, Ryan's sister, reached out through Instagram. "I believe you," she wrote. "I've seen him do shady stuff before. If you need me to talk to the police, I will." It was a crack in the wall of silence around him, and I wasn't going to waste it. I passed her number to Alvarez. She gave a statement confirming she'd seen Ryan rifling through my jacket pocket at a family gathering months ago, muttering something about getting what he was owed. That was the kind of testimony we needed. Meanwhile, at work, the HR investigation concluded and cleared me completely. Helen called me into her office again, this time with a small smile. We found no evidence of wrongdoing. Frankly, the complaint was so poorly faked, it made us suspicious of the person who submitted it. "You're in the clear." Hearing those words was like a weight lifting from my chest. Ryan had tried to poison my career, and he'd failed. But there was still one loose thread, the possibility that he'd try again. I decided to preempt him. I called a meeting with my manager, and HR explained the situation in full detail and asked them to flag any future anonymous complaints against me. That way Ryan's smear tactics wouldn't even get past the first filter. It felt like I was slowly building an armor around myself, piece by piece, layer by layer, while Ryan was out there swinging wildly, hoping to land a blow. But every time he missed, I could feel the tide turning in my favor. The day that confirmed it came in early March when Alvarez called me with a simple statement: "We've got enough. We're moving to trial." Ryan wasn't going to wriggle out of this with excuses or charm. He was going to face everything he'd done in front of a judge with evidence stacked against him. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up at every sound, because I knew the next chapter wasn't just about surviving Ryan's attacks. It was about finally ending them. Trial prep was nothing like I'd imagined. I thought it would be a straight shot, present the evidence, tell the truth, and let the facts crush him. But Alvarez warned me from day one. This isn't just about what we know happened. It's about what we can prove in court beyond reasonable doubt. That meant hours in his office reviewing timelines, receipts, phone records, and my own testimony until I could recite every detail in my sleep. It meant rehearsing answers to questions I knew Ryan's attorney would throw at me. Questions meant to twist my words, paint me as bitter, or suggest I had something to gain by taking him down. I didn't have to guess at what angle they'd take. Ryan's first move became obvious the day I saw him in the courthouse hallway for the preliminary hearing. He was dressed sharp navy suit, hair slicked back, but the smirk on his face was pure provocation. "You really going through with this?" he murmured as he passed, all this over a couple of bucks. "You're pathetic, Alex." I didn't answer. Alvarez had told me not to. Let him talk, he'd said. Every word is a chance for him to slip. In the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The prosecutor laid out the case clearly. Multiple fraudulent loan applications tied to my name and bank details. My stolen card recovered from Ryan's possession, and the pattern of harassment afterward. Ryan's attorney countered with what I'd expected, a narrative where I was the vindictive cousin fabricating the whole thing to punish him for old family disputes. They claimed the card must have been misplaced and that Ryan had borrowed it with permission. I almost laughed at that, but I kept my face neutral. The most brutal part wasn't the accusations, it was hearing my own life dissected like a puzzle for strangers to solve. Every transaction I'd made, every text I'd sent during that period, every interaction I'd had with Ryan, all laid bare. But the turning point came when Emily took the stand. She was calm, measured, but her words landed like hammer blows. She described seeing Ryan go through my jacket at a family barbecue. She described him bragging about having ways to get quick cash if he needed it. And she told the court that when she confronted him about the bank card, he'd told her to mind her own business. Ryan's attorney tried to shake her, asked if she was just trying to protect me, if she had a grudge against her brother. Emily didn't flinch. "The truth isn't a grudge," she said flatly. From that moment, I could see the shift in the room. The jury leaned forward. The judge's expression hardened. Even Ryan's smirk flickered. The prosecutor closed with a point that lodged itself in my chest. This case isn't about a family feud. It's about trust and what happens when someone decides to exploit it for personal gain. Mr. Ward did everything right. He reported the theft, cooperated with the investigation, and endured months of intimidation. And for what? Because someone he trusted thought he'd get away with it. When court adjourned for the day, Ryan walked past me again. No smirk this time, just a tight jaw and eyes that wouldn't meet mine. For the first time since this started, I let myself think, we might actually win this. But I also knew Ryan. If he felt the walls closing in, he'd try something desperate. and that meant the fight wasn't over not yet. The desperate move came faster than I anticipated. 2 days before the jury was set to deliberate, I woke up to a flurry of messages from friends and coworkers, screenshots, links, a post that had been circulating on social media since the night before. It was a long, rambling status written from a freshly created account accusing me of being a manipulative cousin who ruined a good man's life. It claimed that I'd stolen money from Ryan first and that everything I'd said in court was a lie to cover my own tracks. The language was sloppy but biting, and the post had been shared in a couple of local community groups. Enough that it got traction, enough that I knew Ryan had either written it himself or told someone exactly what to say. I didn't panic, not this time. I took screenshots noting the timestamps and sent them straight to Alvarez and the prosecutor. Within hours, they were filing motions to have the posts admitted as evidence of ongoing harassment. Still, walking into work that day felt different. I knew some people had seen the post. I could feel the subtle shift, the way certain coworkers avoided eye contact, the way conversation seemed to dip in volume when I entered the break room. It stung, but I reminded myself the truth was already on record. In a courtroom, not a Facebook thread. The next day in court, the prosecutor addressed it head on. They showed the jury the post pointed out the obvious attempts to smear me mid-trial and argued that it was consistent with Ryan's pattern of intimidation. Ryan's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. "This goes to credibility," the judge said firmly. That moment told me something. The court was seeing Ryan for what he was. The rest of the trial moved quickly. The jury got the case on a Thursday afternoon. I barely had time to pace my apartment before the call came from Alvarez. "They've reached a verdict. You should get down here." The walk into the courtroom was a blur. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Ryan was already seated, shoulders tense, eyes fixed straight ahead. His mother sat a few rows back, face pale. Emily was there too, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When the foreperson stood to read the verdict, the room felt like it was holding its breath. On the charge of felony fraud, guilty. On the charge of theft, guilty. On the charge of harassment, guilty. Each word landed like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples through the air. Ryan didn't move. His face was blank, but I could see the muscles in his jaw working overtime. The judge thanked the jury, set a date for sentencing, and dismissed the court. I didn't celebrate. Not there. Not in front of him. I simply stood, gathered my things, and walked out with Emily beside me. Outside, the winter air was sharp in my lungs. Emily hugged me hard. "It's over," she said. And for the first time since the day I discovered my bank account in shambles, I believed her. But I also knew that closure isn't a single moment. It's a series of choices, what you do after the fight is over. And I still had one more choice to make. That one more choice was about how far I wanted to go. The verdict meant Ryan was facing jail time. Sentencing was in 6 weeks. Until then, he'd be out on bond, technically free to walk around. Though with his reputation now shredded in public and in the eyes of the law, his world was shrinking fast. Alvarez called me 2 days later. "You should know," he said. "Ryan's attorney floated the idea of appealing. It's not likely to go anywhere, but you'll probably hear noise about it." He was right. The noise started almost immediately. Ryan's mom posted a long rant online about ungrateful family members and witch hunts. A few distant relatives I barely knew sent me private messages asking why I'd done this to him. I didn't respond. I'd spent enough time defending myself to people who didn't want the truth, only the version of it that fit their loyalty. What I did do was meet with my bank and credit bureau to lock down every possible weak point in my financial life. We froze my credit, set up alerts for any attempts to open accounts in my name, and put 2-step verification on every service I had. Ryan had stolen enough from me already. He wasn't going to take my peace of mind too. Meanwhile, Emily kept me updated on what little she heard from inside her own family. Ryan wasn't talking to her, but she'd overheard her parents arguing late at night, her father telling her mother to let it go, and her mother refusing. "She's convinced you'll back down," Emily said. "She thinks you're going to feel bad and try to help him at sentencing." The truth, there was a part of me that still wanted to help. Not because I thought Ryan deserved it, but because it's hard to shut off years of believing family was worth protecting. That part of me wrestled with the other part, the part that remembered sleepless nights, harassment notes, public smears, and the sick drop in my stomach when I realized someone I trusted had stolen from me, 2 weeks before sentencing, I got an email from Ryan himself. No subject line, just 2 sentences. "You can still make this easier for me. Tell the judge you don't want me to serve time." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I archived it, forwarded it to Alvarez for the record, and closed my laptop. I'd already made my choice. When sentencing day came, the courtroom was smaller than the trial room. Ryan sat at the defense table looking thinner, his suit hanging looser than before. He didn't look at me once. The prosecutor spoke first, laying out the harm he'd caused, not just financial, but personal. They asked for a sentence that reflected the deliberate nature of his actions. Then it was my turn. I stood the paper in my hands, trembling only slightly. I'd written and rewritten my victim impact statement a dozen times, but when I started speaking, the words came out steady. "I didn't want to be here," I told the judge. "I didn't want any of this. I wanted to believe my cousin would never cross a line like this." But he did, and every step of the way, instead of stopping, he doubled down. "I can forgive a mistake. I can't forgive a campaign." The judge listened without expression. When I finished, they nodded once. Ryan sentenced 3 years in state prison plus restitution for the stolen funds. It wasn't the longest sentence possible, but it was enough. Enough to keep him from hurting someone else for a while. Enough to remind him that choices have consequences. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into the cold, bright air. For the first time in months, there was no next court date, no new statement to prepare, no looming confrontation, just the quiet knowledge that I'd seen this through all the way to the end. And I realized something that was worth more than any apology Ryan could ever give. In the weeks after sentencing, life felt strangely still. For nearly a year, my routines had been built around the fight, gathering evidence, meeting Alvarez, preparing for court. Now I'd wake up and find myself halfway through making coffee before realizing I didn't have a new legal document to review or a hearing to attend. It should have felt like relief, and in some ways it did. My bank accounts were secure, the fraud alerts were in place, and Ryan was exactly where he belonged. But the quiet left room for something else, the emotional fallout I'd been too busy to face. I wasn't prepared for how complicated it would be. Some family members stayed in touch, offering support. Others went silent. A few blocked me on social media altogether. Word got back to me that certain relatives were calling me cold and unforgiving. I thought about reaching out to explain my side, but Emily shut that idea down. "They don't want to hear it," she said. If they cared about the truth, they'd already know it. She was right. So instead, I focused on rebuilding parts of my life that had been on hold. I picked up my guitar again, started running in the mornings, and even took a weekend trip with some friends from work. But there were moments when the weight of it all caught up with me. Walking past Diaz, the coffee shop where Ryan and I used to hang out before family events, finding an old photo of us as kids in my desk drawer. That's when the questions crept in. Could I have handled it differently? Was there a point where I could have stopped it from escalating this far? Late one night, I found myself scrolling through old text threads back before things fell apart. Messages about picking up pizza, fixing his laptop, random memes we'd send each other. It was like looking at a different life, one that belonged to someone else. And then there were the messages I'd gotten after sentencing. Not from him, he wasn't allowed to contact me, but from people who knew him in prison. A couple were mutual acquaintances. One was an anonymous account. They all carried the same tone, guilt-tripping subtle threats or outright pleas for me to do the right thing and push for early release. I forwarded each one to Alvarez, who reminded me that the restraining order extended to third-party contact meant to harass me. "Don't engage," he said. "We'll handle it." So I didn't, but I started journaling more, not about Ryan, but about the choices I wanted to make moving forward. It was part of what my therapist, I'd finally booked a few sessions called Reclaiming Narrative Control. You don't get to erase what happened, she told me, but you do get to decide what part it plays in your life story. That idea stuck with me. One afternoon, a month after sentencing, I stopped by my parents' place for dinner. They'd been cautiously supportive, not wanting to take sides, but not defending Ryan either. After we ate, my dad pulled me aside. "You know," he said, "I'm proud of you. Not for winning, but for not losing yourself in all of this." It was such a simple thing, but it landed deeper than he probably realized. Because for all the legal victories and security measures, the real battle had been keeping my own sense of self intact. And that was the first night I went to bed without feeling like I was still bracing for a fight. I didn't know it yet, but something else was coming. Something that would test whether I'd It happened on a rainy Thursday evening, nearly 3 months after Ryan's sentencing. I was getting home from work, shaking the water off my jacket when I saw the envelope wedged under my apartment door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name in messy handwriting I recognized instantly. For a second, I stood frozen. The restraining order meant Ryan couldn't contact me directly or indirectly, and yet cure was something that had clearly come from him. I opened it slowly, half expecting threats, half expecting some twisted justification. Instead, it was a letter. 4 pages of uneven scrawl starting with, "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I can't leave things the way they are." The letter was a tangle of apologies and excuses. He admitted to taking my bank card, to setting up the loans, to lying in court. He even admitted to the social media smear campaign during the trial. But woven into every confession was a deflection, how he'd been desperate, how he'd felt overlooked by family, how I had more than I needed anyway. Near the end, he wrote, "I've lost everything. You're the only one who can decide if I get a second chance when I'm out. Please think about that." I put the letter down, feeling a complicated swirl of emotions. If he'd written this before the trial, before doubling down, before dragging my name through the mud, maybe it would have meant something. But now, it read less like remorse and more like a calculated move, setting the stage for pity later on. I didn't respond. Instead, I photographed every page and sent them to Alvarez, who promised to pass them along to the prosecutor's office. But the letter did something I hadn't anticipated. It made me confront just how much space Ryan still occupied in my head. Even with him locked away, his words could reach me, shake me, make me replay every moment of betrayal. That night, I sat at my desk and started writing my own letter, not to send, but to say what I would never get the chance to say to his face, without getting pulled back into his orbit. I wrote about the nights I'd stayed awake, wondering if I'd ever be free of the mess he'd made, about the humiliation of explaining to bank managers and credit agencies why my own cousin had stolen from me, about how every time he had a chance to stop, he chose to dig deeper. And then I wrote the part that surprised even me. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even sad. I'm just done. You don't get any more of my energy, my attention, or my forgiveness. Whatever you do when you get out, that's on you. My life isn't built around you anymore. When I finished, I folded the paper and put it in a drawer. I didn't need to send it. The act of writing it was enough. Over the next weeks, I noticed small changes. I stopped checking my phone for updates on his appeal. I stopped wondering what mutual acquaintances thought of me. I started making plans for the future that didn't have his shadow hanging over them. On the day his restitution payment hit my account, the first of many he'd have to make over the next few years, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel like celebrating. I just transferred the money into savings and went for a long walk in the crisp spring air. Because the real victory wasn't that I'd won against him. It was that I'd built a life where his victory or defeat no longer defined me. If someone else asked me what they should do in my situation, I'd tell them this: protect yourself, fight for the truth, but don't let the person who hurt you decide who you are. Ryan's choices will follow him for the rest of his life. Mine will too, and I've decided mine will be about something more than revenge. That's the difference between surviving a betrayal and truly moving past it. And I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living,